All right. Hey, so my name's Zach. I'm the youth pastor here, and I am really, really excited to be here tonight speaking to you as we kick off our new series, Squad Goals. Now, it says Squad Goals Part 2 because we did a similar series last year, and it was called Squad Goals. You guys are so smart. It's just such deep thinkers here. So Squad Goals, now this is the sequel to that, Squad Goals Part 2. If you were a sixth grader or you're new to us this year, then this will be all new to you. If you were here last year, some of this stuff will be a little bit of a repetition or a reminder, I guess more of a reminder of some really good truths. And so tonight, I'm going to talk about kind of a difficult subject. I'm going to talk about just what it looks like to have toxic friendships. And before I get into that, because the big question I want to ask tonight and for us to answer is that by the time we leave this room, we recognize who influences us. Who do we allow to speak into our lives? Like, who do we get our advice from? Who do we look to for influence? But before I do that, I just by a show of hands, is anyone in the room like a really picky eater? Like, you are, lots of picky eaters. Okay, so you can put your hands down. So I was a basketball coach for a long time, and when we'd get ready to go to games, and we were heading to this tournament, and I had this kid every single time he'd get on the bus. So I coached him, his 7th grade year, his 8th grade year, and his 9th grade year. And every time he would get on the bus, he would bring one of two things. One of two things. It was always either a peanut butter sandwich with not jelly or honey or anything else delicious, just peanut butter, not creamy only, not chunky. He would cut the crust off, but he would eat the crust afterwards, like a weirdo, right? And so the second thing he would bring, he brought 3 things, I'm forgetting. The second thing he would bring would be chicken nuggets, not chicken strips. He couldn't eat those. It was too much chicken and not enough nug. So he would eat chicken nuggets that were breaded, but no dipping sauce. I know. Yes, like a weirdo. Then the third thing he would do is the worst one. I don't know how this kid didn't weigh like 8,000 pounds because he would only eat peanut butter sandwiches, chicken nuggets like deep fried, and pizza, but it would have to be cheese pizza. But what he would do is he would order pepperoni pizza and then take the pepperonis off and eat cheese pizza and then not eat the pepperonis afterwards. And I was like, why don't you just eat cheese pizza? It's cheaper. And of course, he didn't pay for his own pizza. But he's like, because I need the pepperoni taste in there. I'm like, well, then eat the pepperonis. He's like, well, that's too much pepperoni. I'm like, that's so weird. That's so weird. Now, for me, I have a couple foods. I'm not that picky, but there's a couple foods that if I eat them, I just internally, I just gag a little bit. And the first is a cucumber. And some of you are like, well, cucumbers aren't that bad. They don't even taste like anything. They taste like sadness. And when I eat a cucumber, a small part of me dies inside. But worse than cucumbers is pickles. It's like the ugly great uncle of the cucumber that has warts all over his face. And if I eat a pickle, I'm like, it's so gross. So sometimes at In-N-Out, I'm telling you way too much about my food choices, but at In-N-Out, I get a hamburger and I always get it animal style. And when I get it animal style, they grill the onions and they put extra spread on it. It's super good, right? But they also put pickles on it. So every single time at In-N-Out, I'm like, hey, no pickles. But sometimes those jerks put pickles in my hamburger. And if I take a bite, it's full-blown panic mode at In-N-Out. And I'm like an undercover agent trying to sneak through my hamburger, trying to figure out where the rest of the pickles are. Now, some of us are really, really picky when it comes to food, right? But very few of us in the room are really picky when it comes to who influences us. And we let whatever kind of people or ideas or advice influence us. And when we hear the word ideas, of concepts, of things that kind of come into our brains and we let them take hold of our brain, a lot of us have no filter on what we allow for people to speak into our lives. And so what we do is we pick really damaging friends because any kind of acceptance to us is good acceptance. And for us, we have to realize that as humans, I firmly believe that God created us to be in relationship. And not like that everyone is in a romantic relationship, but that we're friendships, that we all are designed to relate to each other. And so when God created Adam, the very first man, he created all this other stuff, and God was like, this is good, this is good, this is good, this is good. And then he creates Adam, and he says, that ain't no good. And what he said, that ain't no good, he probably snapped his God finger twos, I don't know. But he looked at him and he said, that ain't no good. It's because Adam was alone. And so God created Eve to be with Adam. And again, it wasn't in a romantic way. It was just, although they were, but it wasn't in a romantic way. It was that man is not meant, or woman, man or women, people are not meant to be alone. We're designed to be in relationships with each other. And I don't know if there's a time that we will ever feel more alone than middle school. I mean, for me, I can look back at my middle school days, and I felt horribly alone. And I think that there's some of you in the room that you can be surrounded by people, 200 other people in this room, and you will still feel alone. And you feel like no one relates to you. You feel like no one cares about you. You feel like no one wants to be around you. And so what we do is instead of looking for healthy relationships, we just want to be accepted by anyone. And there's also not a time in your life where you're going to care more about what people think about you than middle school. I think everyone in this room, no matter how confident, unconfident, high self-esteem, low self-esteem you have, one of the primary things you think about every single day, if you're honest with yourself, is what people think about you. Now, it might be your teachers. I care what my teachers think, for some of you. It might be your parents, but for most of you, it's probably your friends. I really care what the people my age think about me. I really care what the popular kids at my school think about me. I really care what all the kids at school think about me. I want to be one of the popular kids at my school. And for me, when I was in middle school, there was this one kid who was really popular. And I wanted so badly to be friends with this popular kid. And for all of elementary school, he thought I was a total dweeb. And I was. I mean, I was a cool dweeb. I mean, my Star Wars figures were pretty awesome, you know. But for all of elementary school, and my Star Wars figures, my Star Wars books, I could talk Star Wars and Lord of the Rings. Oh man, I was so cool. And in middle school, I finally got to the point where I started talking to this guy, and I'm like, oh my goodness, he's actually accepting me. He actually wants to be my friend. Except for this kid was not a good influence. And he would do things that would get him in trouble all the time. And some of them you're like, oh, that's pretty typical. I see that all the time. Like he would do, but I also went to this private school. And at this private school, like, you did not get in trouble there. And it was really bad when you did. And so this kid would do the thing where he'd sit, and the substitute teacher or the teacher would walk around the room, and he would take pencils and just throw them into the ceiling like this. And he was good at it. He would have been so good at water bottle flipping if it was a thing when I was in middle school. He was just like, pshoo, pshoo, pull the ceiling like a rocket ship. And I would look at that and go, oh, that's so funny. Ha, 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 you're so funny. I didn't think it was funny. I just wanted to be cool. So he's like, oh, yeah, I am funny. So he'd just do it more. And I was a loud kid. I know, deep shock, right? And so I'm laughing, and the teacher would come over, and you know who they'd blame? Me. It was always me. And I never threw no pencil. I was just laughing. And the teacher had to explain to me, hey, it's guilt by association. You are surrounding yourself with a bad influence. You're looking like that's you now. And for a lot of us, like, I would be seen as the ringleader. Some of you guys get seen as the ringleader. I mean, this kid once in science class took a volleyball He took a volleyball, just kind of like this pink one, and he just kind of picked it up in science class, and he just chucked it like at another kid and hit him in the face in the middle of class. Now, for me, I'm like, ha, 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 that's funny. I didn't think it was funny. I thought it was mean, but I wanted to fit in, so I laugh. And the teacher comes by, and you know who they thought threw the ball? Me. It was me again. And this kid, he wasn't my real friend, because a real friend would have been like, I did it. Lock me up, right? Like, what he did instead was, I don't know who threw it. I don't know who did it. And I got in trouble. And I started to realize that we crave acceptance so badly, but we open ourselves up to all kinds of negative influences. And so the Bible talks about friendships, believe it or not. It's all over the Bible. And whether you call yourself a Christian or not, whether you believe that there's a God or not, whether you've read the Bible before or not, I think I'm going to show you just a couple verses that I think no matter what you believe about God or creation or anything, that they will be important to your life. If you just go with me a little bit, and let's take a look. Psalm 1:1 says, "Blessed is the man who walks not in the counsel of the wicked, nor stands in the way of sinners, nor sits in the seat of scoffers." Now, there's nothing in there about God. There's nothing in this verse about Jesus, but here's what it says. If you want to be blessed, don't take advice from the wicked. Now, most of you guys are like, check. I don't hang out with any mass murderers. I'm not there with people that steal cars. I don't take advice from people who are wicked. But that word wicked in the Bible doesn't mean the word wicked the way we would think. It doesn't mean just like pure evil. It just means that anything that's opposite of what God wants for our lives. And what God wants for your life is to live a life that pursues and honors Him. What the world is going to tell you is something totally opposite. And I started to think about what are some things that the world would tell young people that would be against what God would want as far as advice. And here's a list I came up with. There's no truth. Just believe whatever you want. Doesn't matter. There's no truth. You can party and drink, smoke weed all you want. Just don't get in a car, right? That's some worldly advice. Go ahead and drink all you want, smoke weed. Just don't drive. That's dangerous. That's some worldly advice. Do whatever feels good. Do whatever feels good. You only got one life. YOLO, right? Look out for number one. Look out for yourself over everyone else. Hey, if you cheat, just make sure you don't get caught, right? Money will make you happy. These are some lies that the world will tell you, that they will go at you time and time again, and the Bible calls this advice wicked. And if we put that psalm back up there, if you walk in the counsel of the wicked, you listen to the advice of the wicked, it leads to the second thing. We stand in the way of sinners. And when it says to stand in the way of sinners, that means you're walking with them. You're doing what they're doing. Because if you get bad advice and you listen to bad advice, it will always lead to bad behavior. If you let bad advice influence your life, it will always lead you to bad behavior. Middle schoolers, do not think that you're the exception to the rule here. Don't think you're immune to this. You take bad advice from your friends around you. What's going to happen is 1 Corinthians 15:33 says, "Do not be misled. Bad company corrupts good character." Bad advice will always ruin good behavior. It doesn't matter how much you want to follow God. It doesn't matter if you come to youth group every Tuesday, you're worshiping with us, you're talking in your hub groups, you're praying, you're trying to spend time reading the Bible with Jesus. If you spend your moments in school surrounded by bad advice, it's going to corrupt you, regardless. This really smart man, I can't take credit for this quote, but this really smart man, Jim Rohn, says, "You're the average of the 5 people you spend the most time with." So I want you to think in your head for a second. You don't say it out loud, but just who are the 5 people, your fave 5, that you spend the most time with? And when you think of those 5 people, think of the character traits of those people. You are the average of those 5. You will become like the 5 people you spend the most time with. So then I want you to really think about those 5 people and go, do I want to become like those 5 people? Do I actually want to be like the people I spend the most time with? Because if the answer to that is no, then that's probably not a good thing for your life. Because your friends, believe it or not, will actually determine the quality and direction your life will take. There was a study done in Australia several years ago where they were interviewing people, and what they found is people who had toxic friendships, unhealthy friendships, actually lived fewer years than people with healthy friendships. On average, people who had toxic friends lived fewer years because they had stress and ailments and these other things that led to other diseases. And what would happen is that toxic friends would literally make people sick. And so the book of Proverbs says the companion of fools suffers harm. So if you're surrounding yourself with fools, you're going to pay for it. And the Bible describes a fool as someone who knows the difference between right and wrong, but doesn't do it. I think pretty much everyone in this room would admit that there's a right and there's a wrong. Sometimes we choose blatantly, even though we know what's wrong, we do it anyway. That's called sin. And a fool is someone who's going to know the difference between these two and still is going to choose the wrong. So if we walk in the counsel of the wicked, we take advice from the wicked, then we stand in the way of sinners, what's going to ultimately happen is, as Psalm 1:1 says, we'll sit in the seat of scoffers. You don't know what a scoffer is? Sounds like a weird, like, puppy, right? Like a Scotty dog or something. To scoff at something is like a really, like, condescending, put-down laugh like this. Stupid, right? That's what a scoffer is. Now, there's about 40 of you in this room that every time Jack or the band come up to do worship, you start scoffing. You make fun of worship. You do, like, dumb little dances to try to get attention to yourself. You scream. You start talking full volume even though you know it's distracting the people around you. You make jokes about the people who are trying to engage in worship. What you're really doing is you're scoffing at God. You're mocking him. You're mocking him, and you're making fun of his people. I don't know if you know that's what you're doing, but that's what's happening when you scoff during worship. If someone around you is trying to pray, and you go, that doesn't work, that's stupid, you're mocking God. And what happens is when we take bad advice, and then that corrupts our behavior, eventually, before we know it, we're sitting with people who mock God. And maybe you in the room, you're like, I don't mock God. It's just the 8 people around me that are. Yeah, but it doesn't take very long before that behavior gets to you too. And if you don't want to be someone who spits at the God who created you and mocks him, then you might want to rethink who are the people that you're being surrounded with. Some of you in the room have this mindset where you go, I can change the people that I'm around. I can fully change them. And so I want to invite just like 5 people up to the stage. I have 5 hands real quick. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Okay, you guys come up real quick. Let's hear it for these 5 brave victims, volunteers. Okay, so you guys stand right here. Okay. This is 4 of you. I don't know if we knew how to count. Oh, there he is. Okay, cool. Okay, so you seem like a good kid. Okay, now, what's your name? Caden. This is Caden, everybody. Caden is really trying to hang out with 4 people who scoff at God. Sorry, you 4. Okay, so you 4 tend to scoff at God. Now, these 4 are trying to influence Caden. You're trying to influence them. You're having this mindset of like, yeah, I can influence people. Right? I've got this. So what I want you 4 to do, you can step back for a second. I want you 4 to start walking in a circle just this way. Okay, just start walking. Okay, Caden, I want you to start walking the other way, but you've got to try to get them to turn around without really forcing them to. Just try to can't bump them off the stage. You're going to let them turn you around just like that? No, you're committed to your ways. Now, do you see how Caden can't even break into the center of the circle here? So he's trying to walk the opposite direction. Caden, I need you to actually walk with them, but against the grain here. So you got to walk. Yeah, you got to get into the circle, man. Get into the circle. Okay. Now, what? You guys are just dizzy. Everyone's going to fall off the stage now. Okay, you guys can head back to your seats. Now, if we look at people that are moving one direction, and Caden starts jumping in, and he's trying to move in the other direction here, what's ultimately going to happen is he's going to give up. And you know what he's going to do? He's going to start moving in this direction too. You cannot surround yourself with toxic friends and live a godly life. The companion of fools, people who are friends with fools, suffers harm. That's what Proverbs says. So I'm going to go through these really quick, but Andy Stanley, this other really smart pastor guy, he offers 5 guardrails, 5 things that you should avoid if you're in your friend group and you start feeling these things. First one is your core group isn't moving the direction, just like we just showed, isn't moving the direction you want your life to move. Second thing, if your core friend group, if you're in there and you find yourself pretending that you're someone you're not, like I did in middle school, you start trying to pretend and you're adding things to your life that you know isn't really you. You might have a toxic friend group. Number 3, you find yourself compromising. You find yourself saying, well, okay, I know I said I would never do this, but I'm just going to do a little bit. I know I said I would never go here, but I'm just going to take a little bit more step this way. I know I said, and you start compromising your values. Little bit by little bit, you're probably in a toxic friend group. Number 4, you find yourself going to things, but you don't participate in them. Well, I'm just going to go to this party. I'm not actually going to do what the people there are doing. Well, I know that a movie that I shouldn't watch is going to be shown here, but I'm just going to go and hang out and then maybe shut my eyes during the bad parts. Right? We start compromising, and then we start going to these things. We start going to these things, but we don't participate in them, which eventually will lead to participating in them. And then the 5th one, and I think probably the most important, is you start thinking about the people that in your life that you care the most about. And if you don't want them to know what you're doing, then you're probably surrounded by toxic influences. Think about if the person that you care most about is your mom. And you don't want your mom or your grandma or your aunt or your dad or your coach or your teachers. If you don't want the people that you respect the most, maybe you don't even care about them the most, but you respect them the most, and you don't want them to know what you're doing, then you're probably doing something wrong. And so tonight I want to finish by asking you 2 questions. The first is, who do I share my struggles with? Because remember, the big question I said is, where do we get our influence from? So who do I share my struggles with? Some of you in the room, especially if you're a guy, you might be like, no one. I'm a steel trap, baby. I don't let my struggles out ever. I just take all my sadness and I just crunch it up and bury it down here. Right? Like that. Now that's dangerous because ultimately it's going to bubble over and it's going to disrupt your life. The second thing sometimes we do is we share our struggles with other people who are struggling just as badly as us. And I started to realize this. Why is it so hard for us to share our struggles and what's going on in our lives with people who can actually help us, like your hub group leaders or a pastor or a godly teacher at your school or a parent? Why is it so hard to share our struggles with people? And I think it's because, I want to try to illustrate it this way. Like, this is my beautiful pink volleyball. I'm a terrible volleyball player. Like, I wish I was good at it. I really do. It's a fun sport. I'll go and play beach volleyball once in a while. And guys, it's bad. Like, it's really bad out there. But I'm tall, so I can kind of do the thing where I spike it, into the net and be like, yeah. Because I played basketball, so I can time my jumps okay. And so what I started to realize after a while is if other bad people came and played, I'd feel really good about my volleyball abilities. And before I knew it, I'd be kind of coaching them and be like, hey, you know what? You should do it this way. You should really hit the ball this way instead. Now, I don't really know what I'm talking about, and I'm bringing them down in the process, right? But if good volleyball players show up on the sand, all of a sudden, I get very sheepish and just kind of oh, yeah, volleyball? What's that? And I all of a sudden shut down a little bit. And I get intimidated. Why? Because I don't want to show them that I struggle with volleyball. I'm prideful. So I want to show them that I'm okay, but I can't because I'm not good at volleyball. So there's no way I can fake my way to being good at volleyball in front of really good volleyball players. Does this make sense? It's really easy for me to fake my way for being a good volleyball player in front of bad volleyball players. But in front of good volleyball players, man, I fall flat on my face, sometimes literally on the sand. And so for us, we do the same thing spiritually. We look at people that we think are so far ahead of us, and we go, there's no way I can be like that. There's no way I can do those things. There's no way I can be as strong as my hub group leader, or read the Bible like my hub group leader can, or pray, or they will never understand what I'm going through. They have no idea what I've been through. And so what we do is we look to people who have been through something similar to us and have gone through that, usually are still going through it. And typically, if you really are honest with yourself, the people that you run to for advice are not handling their situation well. They're struggling just as bad or worse as you. We always go to the people who play the game the same level or worse than us. We never go to the people who play the game better than us and say, hey, could you help me? Because if I actually went to those volleyball players and I said, hey, could you help me a little bit? Before I knew it, those good volleyball players would probably show me how to get better. And in fact, most of them would probably say, hey, believe it or not, I was just as bad as you a few years ago. Here's what I worked on. Some of us are so scared to be real and honest with our hub group leaders. We can't go to them and say, hey, I'm really struggling with this. Could you help me? Because we're like, oh, no, I can't go to Jesse and talk to Jesse. He's so spiritual and stuff. He plays the drums. I can't do that. Oh, I can't go to John. I can't go to Trisha. I mean, they won't understand. And you might be so surprised that your hub group leader is going to look you in the eye after you share your struggle with them and say, hey, I know what you're going through. I've been there. Let me show you how I got out of that. Let me show you how I overcame this. Let me show you how I continue to walk with Jesus here, instead of running to the people around us that don't give us good advice. So the band comes up to play one last song here. There's this like really old cartoon. Some of you probably have no idea what this is, but I used to love this cartoon. It's called Charlie Brown and Snoopy. And like every year, yes. And like every year, there's this like Charlie Brown Christmas special and Charlie Brown Thanksgiving special, and they're so cute. And they're little cartoons. And the dog, Snoopy's really cool. He's the one laying on the booth. But there's this character, Lucy, the girl that's behind the booth. She's the biggest know-it-all ever. And these kids are supposed to be like 8 years old, right? So you know any 8-year-olds, they like think they know everything. And Lucy always sets up this booth. And it says, counseling help, 5 cents. And she goes around and tells people, I'm a counselor. I'm a psychologist. I'm a psychiatrist. I can help you with your problems. And so all these other kids go up to her, and like Charlie Brown will be like, hey, I'm really depressed. I don't know. I'm really sad. And she'll be like, suck it up. That'll be 5 cents. There's my advice. We continually go to toxic friends and let them influence us and let these influences in that we should never, ever, ever let in. And we go to them like they're some kind of expert. How would our lives change if we actually went to people who knew a little bit of what we were going through, actually knew? How would our lives change if we actually let people in that were good influences and we were pretty picky with our influences the same way we're picky with food? Would our lives look a little bit different?